All right. So, in order to tell if a habitat is healthy, one way is to tell how biodiverse it is. So, we have to have a mathematical way to actually measure that biodiversity. We can do this in a couple different ways. One of the ways is through genetic diversity. So, a little bit of a review of regular bio. So, in your DNA, we have genes, and those genes code to make proteins. So, proteins are going to be those large molecules in your body that do stuff and make stuff. So, proteins make up enzymes, proteins make up your hair structure, your eye structure, they make up everything in your body. And those proteins are responsible for inheritable traits such as hair color, body size, all of that stuff that I have listed down there. If we have changes to those genes, those can be mutations. Mutations can be good, or mutations can be bad. Or mutations cannot matter at all and they can be silent mutations. So, all of that is review of regular bio. Some of these mutations that are good are going to be more likely to be passed down because if you have a good mutation, it's going to make you healthier, make you stronger. And when we're talking about animals, it's going to make you more viable, so more likely to actually have offspring. Some mutations might be bad. Those are typically going to become less common in an environment, and silent mutations just don't matter, and we would typically never know that they're there. So when we're looks like I'm a turkey vulture. So when we're talking about genetic diversity, if we have new traits that are beneficial, oops, and they don't necessarily depend on the environment. So if we have a random mutation and it causes something to happen, like it causes turkey vultures to lose the feathers on their head, that might seem really, really bad. However, vultures and different scavenger birds don't have feathers on their head, and it actually has reduced their risk of getting disease because they eat like dead stuff. And when they're like getting their heads in there, they don't have feathers to hold on to bacteria and mites and all that stuff that's in dead carcasses. So they're actually healthier. It's not going to be beneficial for birds that are found in colder climates because obviously their head's going to get cold and they depend on their feathers for warmth. So these vultures that live in warmer climates, they're either going to migrate like the turkey vultures in Wisconsin do, or they just live in warmer climates and not having those feathers is beneficial. So through the process of natural selection, that trait has become common. And now all vultures don't have feathers on their head, which is kind of cool. So when we're talking about diversity as well, we can also measure diversity with the diversity of species. So over time, beneficial mutations will accumulate, and sometimes individuals will resemble original species less and less. And just like we talked about in regular bio, in the Galapagos finches, we started like with one finch species and then they went off into like 14 different ways because of all of the different food stuff. They have diversified themselves with their beaks to be able to eat different types of food. So this has also happened in habitats. This can be really, really beneficial with all these different finches because if a drought comes through and kills off one of the food stuff, it's not going to kill every single finch species. It might make one typical species suffer a little bit, but it's not going to kill them all off. Okay, so I want you guys to think of these questions and then pause the video and talk about these as a class. So, why do all species exhibit different traits? And where does biodiversity come from? Okay, so do you have an answer, Greta? She's telling you guys. So you guys can pause the video, talk about these with your class, and then unpause it and watch the rest of it. All right, and you guys might be able to hear Greta whining in the background because we're going to do some math. She seems okay with it now. So, what we are going to be calculating is called Simpsons Biodiversity Index. So, this is actually a mathematical way to tell how biodiverse an ecosystem is. And this can measure both species richness, which is the number of species per sample, and also evenness. So, this is the abundance of each species. And this is really, really important for the example down below. So, if we have all of these different plant species, we can look at the first column, sample 1, and we have a daisy, a dandelion, and a buttercup. And all those 3 are pretty even, right? They're all like around like 300-ish in there. And if we look at sample 2, we also have 3 species. So their richness is going to be the same, but the evenness is not the same. There's only 20 daisies, 49 dandelions, and then 931 buttercups. So we can use this mathematical formula to actually figure out and calculate the biodiversity and how healthy that ecosystem is. When we get to 0, that means that there is no diversity. It is like Oosberg, okay? And if we get to 1, that is like the perfect ecosystem, that is infinite diversity. No ecosystem is ever going to be a 1, okay? So down below, this is what everything is. So we have, get my little pen here. So this lowercase n here, this is going to be the number of organisms of a particular species. And the big N down below, that is going to be the total number of organisms of all species. So up above, we have that sum symbol. So it's a bunch of stuff that we need to add up. And then we divide that, and then we take 1 minus that number to get our biodiversity index. So we're going to do a practice problem. All right, so here is a practice problem written out. So on the side, we see that we have a bunch of different types of species of insects. So we have beetles, spiders, true bugs, and caterpillars and sawflies. So these are the numbers of each of these organisms. So we have these down here. So we have beetles, that's this first one right here. And this is the N and N minus 1 for the beetles. And then for the next one, we have spiders. So we found 20 spiders in our sample. So we're going to add 20 times 20 minus 1. And then our next one is going to be our true bugs. Oops. So that is 3. So 3 times 3 minus 1. And then lastly, we also have our caterpillars and our sawflies. So that is this number right down here. And when we added it up, we found that there were 28 total bugs in our sample. And that is this 28 times 28 minus 1. Okay. So in this example here, we have extrapolated all of the math down to add everything up. So we end up with 394 divided by 756. And that gives us a Simpsons Biodiversity Index, D equals 0.52, where 0 is, that's actually flip-flopped. So 0 is going to be very low diversity and 1 is very high. So 0.52, that's right in the middle. Okay, so it's right in the middle. So our richness for this example is 4 because there are 4 different species present. Our species evenness, it's not very even. It's 20 versus 2 versus 3 versus 3. And the level of species dominance is high. So spiders are going to be dominant. And our Simpsons Biodiversity Index number is 0.52, so that's going to be right in the middle. That might not mean much, but we can use that to compare to other habitats. And that's what you guys are going to be doing with your practice problems.